Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Serious Leadership. Whether you are growing your business, growing your career, or possibly both, thank you for listening. I am so excited for the opportunity to have with me today Trevor Lane, owner and CEO of Distribution Systems International. Trevor, you have one of my favorite company taglines, and I'm just going to jump right into it. We've known each other for a number of years, and I know what you do, but I only recently came across this tagline, and it is so comprehensive and apropos of what you do, and that's building storage around your supply chain. So let's start off by putting a little bit of context around that. What does building storage around your supply chain mean to you?
For us, it's trying to convey what we do in as simple terms as we can, yet try to not dumb down what we do too much. It's weird. We're kind of in this weird space where it's not rocket science, it's not super sexy, but it's really, really needed. And we're able to help people at times, in a really big way. So how do you kind of capture all that in this really simple little quick tagline? We didn't want it to be long. We didn't want it to be presumptuous. Again, didn't want to dumb it down too much, but how do I make shelving and cabinetry sexy? I don't think we really achieved it in the tagline, but I think we kind of got close. That's the hope anyway. And I think the hope with everything, especially, when you're involving a sales-driven company, is trying to elicit a little bit of curiosity. And like, all right, what are these guys all about? Like they probably, hopefully, already know I sell carts, but I'm hoping that my tagline kind of creates a little bit more interest in finding out more about DSI.
So you make carts, shelving, cabinets. Where are these typically going into?
For us, the hope is hospital wide. Certainly, we've got kind of our two uh, heavy hitters, and typically for us, it's the OR and then the support area for the OR, which is the sterilization area, so SPD, central supply, or whatever. But our I call it, kind of our two best customers or two best departments within acute care facilities. Typically, we only involve ourselves with hospitals, nothing long term, a teeny bit of surgery center. But again, ultimately, we're talking a proper hospital. And usually we do really well in both the operating room and the sterilization areas. Again, though, we're hospital wide everywhere from biomed to pharmacy to engineering. We sell cabinets and shelving into.
So what's the difference between cabinet and shelving that might go into, say, a manufacturing company and it's holding office supplies to an acute care OR sanitary environment?
Typically, it just comes down to the materials it's made of because of this sanitary needs within a hospital. And typically, can you sterilize it? Not all areas the equipment needs to be sterilized, but certainly in a lot. And hospitals are a really, really heavy, hard environment on equipment. So typically, we need to beef it up a little bit. The product that you would find in a Home Depot, while may look identical to what you see in a specialty area of a hospital, they are made very differently. But again, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's the material that it's made of, typically, to allow it to be cleaned properly and last a little bit longer and kind of support bigger, heavier, harder work, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. You talk about this is physical product. You're working within the supply chain. It's in your tagline. But a minute ago, you just said we're a sales-driven company.
Yeah, very much so. The engine that drives most company are the people. And for our company especially, it's the salespeople that drive the whole entire thing. I don't want to diminish, I'm not a salesperson anymore, my role or any of the support roles in here. I can actually, it's crazy, but I can liken it to just the hospital. I mean, the engine that drives the hospital is typically the operating room, and everyone else is the support staff around it. For us, it's our salespeople, and everybody else is the support staff around it. So my most important folks are the sales team. I mean, everybody knows that within this company.
You've got a lot of clarity around that. You just mentioned I'm not a salesperson anymore. How did you get started in the company?
This is a fun one. So graduated from Ohio University, go Bobcats, back in 1993. And I was set to take the medical entrance exams. Did horribly average, didn't do poorly, did not do well. And I was sitting at the kitchen table, and 3 years prior, my dad had started a business. And I remember he's like, "So what are you going to do now?" And my response was, "Well, I think I'm, kind of super into genetics. I think I'd like to go back and maybe get my master's and toy with the idea of doing something in that world." And he's like, "Fantastic. How are you going to pay for that?" And I was like, "I no idea." He had paid for my college. And his next words were like, "Great, now you're working for me." And within literally 2 weeks, I had already started, kind of loose selling in some minor facilities, and just got hooked. And, shortly thereafter, my girlfriend at the time from college, who knew my best friend, recruited my best friend. Another year after that, my younger brother joined, and it was really the four of us that built the company. So that's kind of the history on DSI in a very, very small nutshell.
As I'm sure every moment you can relive in great detail because you've had a lot of ups and downs as you've grown this company, a multi-generational company, as I'm sure those who are in family businesses or working with siblings or parents can understand what some of those ups and downs are. But as you're growing it, I can imagine it wasn't just the straight trajectory.
No, it never is. And I think especially, we literally in 1990, when my father started the company, annual revenue was $30,000. So when you're that small, I think literally until you're almost a $5 million company, it's just these series of 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, another step forward, half step back. And you definitely, it's just a series of highs and lows, and it's how you manage that. And I think, it's trial by fire, but you learn so much over that period. And I think, for me to have no experience and kind of just get thrown in the fire, I actually appreciated that way to learn. Or my personality type is as such that I need to learn that way. I'm not a big planner. I need to jump into the deep end and just see what happens. And, certainly you're going to take some hard knocks that way. But for me, it was a good way to do it. And for us as a business, it was a great way to do it. I think also when you're that small and you're that tight knit, it was, my best friend, we basically always say he's the third brother. So you kind of get galvanized really early. And because it's so small, you're kind of doing it for one another. We built up the company kind of based on that. Like I tell everybody, I run it like a hockey team or like a family, but it's just how we progressed as a group. It made sense to us to kind of run it that way and become bigger that way. I don't know. It's a weird, it's hard to describe, but it makes sense to us because it's the only way we've ever done it. It might not be the easiest way or the best way, but for us, kind of having 3 mini-me's to my father, the culture was already set. So now it's just adding the right people that want to be on our bus, because there was, minimal difference between the four of us and what we did and how we did it, because my dad trained us in the spinning image of him, which is what he wanted. But it does keep everything very aligned. And you know when you've messed up, you get screamed at like a son. It's not like a boss, which probably makes for some even bigger fireworks at times. But at the same time, it also allows, I think, for you to move on a lot quicker, a lot easier. So there were plenty of mistakes made.
And you mentioned that you're galvanized together and culture. I want to dig into that a little bit because you're probably one of the strongest, clearest culture-oriented CEOs that I know. And there's a true belief system there. And it's known, you go about it. And you mentioned, you know the team that you're joining. You
Yeah,
know what this hockey team looks like. You know what our culture is. Um, how did you come to that culture is everything? So that's every conversation is around that.
for sure. And again, for us, everything kind of revolved around the sales group to start. And what we found is if we kind of, you want similarities, excuse me, but you also want differences to bring different things to the table. And with us, again, we kind of use this hockey team analogy where I need right wingers, I need centermen, I need defensemen, I need goalies, and then I need that support staff, the coaching staff around the team. But ultimately, we know we want hockey players. And then once I find, okay, this person sounds like a hockey player to me, where am I going to plug them into the lineup where they perform best? But, during the interview process, we are incredibly transparent on what these folks are getting into. We are not the norm. We're not kind of big corporate. There is not a lot of governance going on. One of my favorite sayings is, "I let the lunatics run the asylum." So if you're almost, kind of an entrepreneur, even though you're working for a business, you're almost like your own little company out there. And we give massive amounts of autonomy once you've proven yourself. But again, I think that as we've gone along, we know what to look for people and what to expect for culture. And we kind of match that up in the interview process. And even then, sometimes we get it wrong, or some people are not, you know, to do what we do over long periods of time can be tough. To get out there and grind every single day can be very, very wearing, but it's the only way you're successful. One of the other things that we know is that there's no shortcuts. Like, you're candidly, I don't think there's anything called the American dream. I think hard work creates the American dream. It's nothing that happens instantaneously or quickly, or there's a shortcut that allows you to get straight to it, other than winning the lottery. And again, our people understand that, and they kind of know it coming in. We've already hired for someone who is able to just get up every single morning and go out there and grind, whether they have to or not. It's just in them. And I think once you kind of have figured that out, it's really easy finding people that fit that culture. And then we kind of let their personalities run wild, and then we get all that variance that kind of adds to the sauce, you know what I mean? And then really some fun starts to be had.
And you do a great job of celebrating those ones because it's a grind and you get no 10, 20, 30 times, or I'm expecting this to happen this month. It may not happen for 3 months. How do you build the culture around supporting them through that and then really celebrating those wins? Because that's a high-low journey in and of
Oh,
itself.
it's crazy. And you're absolutely right. We learned that it's just like some kind of a sporting team where you're gonna get destroyed in certain games. And it's knowing, kind of how to leverage what you just learned when you got so destroyed so that you can start racking up a couple wins. And then again, we're crazy transparent with the revenue that we're trying to attain. And we call it winning a Stanley Cup. And when we get to that revenue number, typically we'll take the entire company and spouses somewhere to celebrate. And I think, we do a monthly meeting where we kind of share the wins with everybody. But then we have this big, huge, great big championship win that we celebrate only when we get there, but we do something really big and really special. And I think it helps because, to your point, it's hard, man. What these folks are doing is really, really hard. And I think that when they're able to to achieve something really important, and not just from like a revenue number, but being able to set a goal and get it and then win it, you've got to celebrate that. And it just makes sense for us in our culture and how we are. And, I get to throw that Stanley Cup championship party when we do it, and it's fantastic.
And it's fun because you've made a transition from that, because you've said, gosh, that getting to 5 was 2 steps forward, 4 steps
Oh
back.
yeah.
What was that 5 to 10 like?
5 to 10 wasn't as crazy as far as the highs and lows go, but it certainly took longer. For us to, I should probably take another short step back. Speaking of 2 forward, 1 back, we have a direct sales force. So it takes a long time to get, 15 people up and running. It's literally more than a year a person. Typically you're in 18 to 36 months to get that salesperson up and rolling. So, we started the company in 1990. I think we didn't hit 20 million until 2022. So think of the duration to go from 30,000 to 20 million. That is incredibly slow in my perception of things. And it felt like an eternity at points. But, I think for us, one of the keys to our success has been that slow growth, and kind of the goal is always long term. It's not just getting a quick sale and burning the customer. Like, it's about establishing the relationship and then coddling that relationship along. So I've got that customer for 10, 15, 20 years that's ultimately going to allow me to get to that $25 million goal or whatever's next. But it's for us, it's always about playing that long-term game.
You mentioned the mini me, so 15. You started with, my
Yeah.
dad trained the 4 of us in his image. You can't necessarily multiply that out. And at some point, you've stepped out of it. You mentioned at the very beginning, well, when I've stepped out of that sales role, that's a big transition.
Yeah, it was huge. It's really weird and I think especially to certainly I was in my territory for 27 years before I got bumped out of it and kind of into this role, if you will. You definitely get very comfortable when you're in a position that long, and you gain a lot of experience. So I kind of felt naked when I stepped out of it, and you kind of, in essence, I had to relearn my new position, and that took a little bit. But again, I think for us, the culture is so similar, and we all have the same beliefs that, they were able to kind of wait and let me learn my position. And hopefully the team now thinks like I'm actually doing a half decent job. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you've got to wait on the actual leadership team to develop, you know what I mean, before you can take that next step. And I know yeah, it was definitely odd. It was very odd for me, kind of having to take a couple steps back and get really inquisitive again and try and figure some stuff out. But it was fantastic learning experience, that's for sure.
And what I'm hearing is you didn't just wake up one morning and say, all right, I got all this free time. I'm stepping out of this. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. That I'm guessing there was some kind of a progression, whether it was intentional or not. What did that look like?
Yeah, so for us, it was there was a little bit of gosh, I don't even know the right word for it. Ultimately, what happened? So I have had a younger brother, and when he and I took over the company, he was the CEO, he was the president, he was the leader, younger brother. And I tell everybody still to this day, I'm the world's best assistant coach. I was born to kind of be that second in command. I know how to finesse people a little bit more than the leader does. I know how to kind of bridge the gap between factions, et cetera, et cetera. I think it takes a really, really delicate touch to kind of be that assistant coach, because you've got to worry more about the players and what they're thinking, and try and, again, explain what the coach wants you to do, because the coach is just up there screaming what he wants them to do. So ultimately what happened was, unfortunately, we lost my brother to cancer early. And I was up. I was the next man up, and I went from the assistant coach to interim head coach. And it was pretty wild. It was not something that was expected. Again, extremely confident in my role as assistant coach, not as a head coach. And it took me a little while to develop into becoming a head coach.
You mentioned part of that was developing the leadership around you.
Oh
And
yeah.
how much does that play into the role that you're now able to, I'm going to say
Well,
you get to do?
yeah, absolutely. Without them, I would fail. And again, I keep using this hockey analogy, but any company out there, like you have to surround yourself with the best people. You want to assemble the best team. And, you know, for us, I was incredibly lucky. My best friend is now co-owner. So I've known him since sophomore year in university, Gray Lindsley. He was already built in. He was one of the mini-me's. So check. My mother dabbled on the finance and accounting side for probably the first 5 to 8 years of the company. And I had, kind of at the time, not a childhood friend, but a friend I'd met when I first moved to California. His wife ultimately graduated, got a master's. My mom loved her so much, she brought Wendy Sevilla in as our controller at the time. And Wendy's developed so incredibly. She's now our CFO. But so I've had two people in place on the leadership team so Wendy's 20 plus years and Gray is 30. He started in 94, 95. So he's 30 plus years. And then we were able to add our VP of sales and marketing, Ian Loper, 10-ish years ago. And that kind of really completed my team. So, again, I'm able to let the lunatics run the asylum. And then within that, I've got Ian, Wendy, and Gray kind of watching over them and watching over me because I still need to be watched over at times. But yeah, without the three of them, we would not be, regardless of what I did or didn't do, nothing happens without them.
It's incredible. And you say what I'm doing now, and you still need to be managed. Some of it, it's really tough when you're an owner and you've been in the business, you've had a territory, you've grown up to see a different role. So if you paint the picture around what does that role look like right now?
Yeah, I think for me, uh, you certainly you're never ever supposed to have any preconceived notions. But I think in sales, when you do it that long, you kind of learn very quickly and you're able to, again, kind of listen through what their problems are. But typically, once you kind of hear them start off on where they're going, you know pretty much what the problem is and what the solution is going to be. And for me now, it's a different set of problems. And I found that like there can be no preconceived notions. I've got to be open to everything and anything. And when you're just starting in something, I think it just lends itself to being that way. Like you cannot be rigid. And again, for me, that's the biggest learning process is again to get more fluid, become more fluid, like just open to everything. Curiosity's got to kill the cat. I need to look at and think about everything and not just jump straight to the solution because I don't really know the solution yet.
One of the questions I get a lot from CEOs who are saying, I'm kind of tired of the day to day. I wish I didn't have to wake up every morning and be the one watching overseeing the asylum. Um, they can't necessarily see that next step but if it's not me overlooking it, then how do I know what's going on?
Yeah, and I think for us, there's two things. I think if you assemble the right people, you already know what's going on. You can let the lunatics run the asylum because you've got the right people in place. Like I can and do go away for weeks at a time and just let the thing roll. Now, within that, there's certainly a lot of checks and balances that have been established. So we have a daily report that goes out to the management team. So I know exactly what our orders, our invoicing, and our receivables were that day, every single day, Monday through Friday. And then we do some meetings basically monthly. And we've got a sales team monthly. We do a financial meeting monthly. I do a management meeting monthly. And I think that's it. It's those three. So those have to happen. We're fluid in when they happen that week of the month,
Mhm.
but that has to happen. And we meet like clockwork and we just take care of business at that point. So whilst I do say the lunatics are running the asylum, I am definitely having a regular scheduled meeting. We definitely look at data a lot and not necessarily just that daily data, but we measure a ton of data. And that helps me be a lot more comfortable in just stepping up and out and kind of managing at that 35,000 foot level. I,
Mhm.
I know when I was in the field, my dad did that for me, and that's how I wanted to be managed. That's how I want to manage my folks, and that's how I want my people to be managed. And it works perfectly well when that all syncs up.
You mentioned that you're very data driven, that the data tells a
Yeah.
story. You've got a lot of sports analogies. I can imagine that you are scoreboard driven. I
Yeah.
can,
Yeah. We're pretty
that's how you know you're winning.
totally. We are fanatical about that. So we actually do for the sales team, we do a daily scoreboard. You hit the nail on the head where we
Right.
broadcast to the entire team and we show the team members who put points up on the board that day. And they know what the daily number is that needs to be hit. They know what the monthly number is that needs to be hit. And they know what the yearly number is that needs to be hit for them individually. And that goes all the way down to their profitability as a salesperson in this company. And we are measuring everything over what I just described.
Wow. I can imagine when you look at, you know exactly where you're at now, you know where you need to be a year from now. You've had this amazing growth and you said 35,000 foot level. I can imagine where you're not, your mind doesn't need to be focused on what do we need to do tomorrow? What do we do tomorrow? You've got that set up. So you get to think, well, tomorrow could be 2 years, 3 years. You kind of get to be in that fun visionary stage. And you and I have talked about this. That
Yeah.
is the role of a CEO,
Yeah.
which is to set the vision, give clarity around the vision, and get rid of the roadblocks. What do you see as kind of the next headline for the company in the, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that may be? What do you see
Yeah,
as
I
that?
think it's much of the same with slow controlled growth. For our $20 million Stanley Cup party, the entire company and spouses are going to the Caribbean. So I would think hopefully within the next 5 years, we win our $25 million Stanley Cup. And the headline is DSI company trip to Europe. And we all get to go and have a party in Europe together. That's
Is
that's as simple as I want it, candidly. I don't want to lose any of my people. And
it's
maybe add a few more good ones, but that's it.
it's always a time. DSI takes the Stanley Cup to Europe.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
everyone's
Third,
going to
so
be wondering,
DSI
how are
wins.
you doing that?
Yeah. DSI wins third Stanley Cup. The company goes to Europe. I think it's the same old. It's like it hasn't changed. It's good old fashioned hard work.
Mhm.
It is customer service and it's enabling each other as a team. Like we do not function as individuals in this company. I like even my salespeople, whilst they have their own individual territories, there's help going on. There's I love the competitiveness between people, but someone in Ohio can't sell into Oregon and steal that commission or that revenue. That doesn't happen the way we've set it up. So yeah, I want those three things to continue. And within that, when that's going on, everybody's having fun. You're winning, you're having fun, you're developing, you're getting better. It's just, I don't know, or well, at least to me, that's fun.
Well, you've got a lot of passion around that, and it's very much aligned with your culture, your belief systems. And I appreciate that you said slow, steady growth, and here's the plan to get there. And we've proven that we've got the playbook.
Yeah, yeah,
We're going to stay true to our playbook until we need to change that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's critical is I think you need to understand what kind of, machine you are, or what type of hockey player you are, or what kind of runner you are. And you need to run your race. Don't try and run somebody else's race. Like, do it the way you need to do it. And I think that sets yourself up. And then within that, you can't be afraid to pivot or change or, oh man, the race just changed. We went from a 5K to a 10K, right? We got to run longer now. Haven't hit goals yet. This is going to take a whole lot longer. And you just got to put your nose down and go the next 5K.
I love it. You gave a little piece of advice there. So you got to run your race your way.
Yeah.
Having gone through what you've done for decades, multi-generational business, you've seen a lot of what other business owners have yet to go through. What would be some great kind of pieces of advice or tips to get in the right mindset?
Yeah, I think and I kind of touched upon it a little bit before, at least for me. And again, it might be a terrible tip for somebody else, but for me, the faster I start running the race, the better I do. I think a lot of people can get in like totally bogged down in what's analysis paralysis or paralysis analysis. And I think, again, at least for me, and some people might have to do that. They might have to have all that practice to go out and start something. For me, it's not. It's jump in with both feet. Hopefully you can swim and let's see where this goes. And I think a lot of times that can't help. Just do it. Stop thinking about it. Just do it and see where that takes you.
There's a saying in our company, all answers are answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to get going and see
Yep.
what's the answer on this one. Did we get it right or
Yep.
wrong? Where do we need
Exactly.
to
And
adjust
I
or
mean, and you
pivot?
just keep going. If you got it wrong, it's fine. Just keep going though. You can't stop.
I think that what you've done has worked for you and it's worked for the company, and you've been able to inspire those around you. And I think that though you and I have had this debate on, I think you are an inspiration to other business owners and other leaders because of those transitions that you've been through, none of which were easy.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah. And
done it. You've done the tough things.
I think you have to. And I think as a business owner, I think especially to achieve, kind of long-term success, which we're finally at, you got to go through those hard times. Like you've got to take a bunch of punches on the chin, a bunch of losses until you can really start accruing a bunch of wins. And again, at least for my personality, that's how it equates, how it works, how it works. That's the way I learn is through a bunch of losses and then finally start putting some wins together.
It's always great when you can learn from someone else, and it's hindsight, it's 2020. I've had a lot of leaders give some really good advice on, gosh, what would be one big thing that I do differently?
And again, I touched upon it a little bit. There was a time where I definitely, when I had first started in my role as company leader, I had some preconceived notions on the product that should be selling and into what departments we should be selling to. And that was largely based on my success. I didn't really look at the success going on around me that the other territory managers were having. And it took the VP or my VP in, he's like, no, this is the department we should be selling into. And this is the product we should be selling into, which was very different than my preconceived notion that I'd been so successful at. And when I opened up to that and I wasn't so shut down, like, no, this is how we have to do it. It was amazing what happened to the company. And I think, even the people around me kind of breathed a little bit of a relief because they knew that, while I was doing it so well this way, it might not have been the best way to do it. So, but I think again, just being open to what your star players are showing you and letting them run with that. So
kudos to you to having that galvanized relationship. Yeah, I love that you use the word galvanized, that he felt comfortable pushing back on you on that, because
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
not always the case.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
tend to overshadow, and we don't hear, or those around us don't feel comfortable enough to make sure that we hear it.
yeah. Yeah, I joke. I surround myself with alphas, which can make for fireworks at times, and which can make me being more shut down because I'm pretty sure I'm right. So, again, I think you got to be open. As strong as your personality is, you got to be open. And pretty thankful to Ian that I opened up and listened to what he was saying, and he's really taken us to the next level.
Oh, that's fantastic. Trevor, thank you so much for sharing and your words of wisdom. I feel like whatever race I'm about to run, you just helped me hack it.
Right
Uh,
on.
I and all that you're able to share and the authenticity that you do it with. You always show up as you and nothing but you, and you is just, you're hitting the nail on the head every single time.
Not every time.
I apparently haven't shared it all with you, Kristen.
Yeah, only the wins. Only the wins. We
Oh.
bury the ugly losses. We study them, then we bury them.
And then I love, so you've got the, let's figure out how to not do it again. And then we're going to have the funeral.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's certainly working for you and the culture that you've built around that. I love that every day that culture is your North Star. And you've often said, anytime we've deviated from that, it did not go well.
No, no, no. The employee didn't last, or we made a massive mistake, or yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, it takes a couple times veering off course. Then when you're finally back on that course and you are set, oh man, it makes things so much easier.
Well, thank you so much for showing us that course and your absolute best to your continued success. And I plan on having you back. I want to see that 25 Stanley Cup.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll bring you to Europe with us.
Fantastic. Trevor Lane, owner and CEO of DSI. Thank you for sharing your insights and all that you have learned so that maybe the rest of us can learn them a little quicker.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me, Kristen.
Take care.